You are listening to Thyroid Nutrition Podcast, episode 68. Welcome to the Thyroid Nutrition Podcast with me as your host, Lahana Vigliano. We talk all things holistic living, real food nutrition, fitness, herbs, essential oils, and so much more. I'm here to make your holistic lifestyle simple, easy, and fun for you and your family. I am beyond thrilled that you are here. So let's go over and hop over to today's episode. Hi guys, happy Tuesday. Some of you may have saw this episode pop up and you're like, oh, another one about thyroid. And maybe that's because you don't have thyroid issues. And, it's kind of one of those things like you don't even really look into it unless you have problems with it. But the thyroid is so important for everyone. Even every day we should be taking steps into making sure that, we're doing the right things to keep our thyroid healthy and working properly. And so I highly encourage that this episode will benefit every single person. Not if you just have thyroid problems, but everyone. So I encourage you to listen and stay till the end. Today's guest, Robin, I really love having her on because I remember a couple years ago, I actually hopped on one of her webinars and I don't have problems with my thyroid, but I'm always curious about learning more and more and more. And I covered the very, very basics of thyroid in school. So I just remember hopping on, wanting to learn more. And the way she described everything and the way she explained it, I loved it. I really, really loved it. It was simple, but I understood and I really had a better grasp on thyroid health. So when I remember that a couple years ago, and I just kind of had to have her on a couple years ago, I didn't have the podcast. I would have been asking for her to be on my podcast a long time ago. But I think this episode you are just going to love, and you're going to come out really, really understanding your thyroid. So she is very reachable. So if you have any questions afterwards, you can always comment if you are on my website, and you can comment below in the episode and ask questions. And I always refer, guests that I have on the podcast to make sure that they go check them and, she can answer more questions for you. But she's really awesome, and she's actually in Austin as well. So I swear, ever since we moved here, I feel like, oh my gosh, you're in Austin too? I've been talking to a lot of people that's been in Austin. So I thought that was an awesome coincidence. And, I hope everyone's summer is going good. It's already mid-June. I think that's just insane. It's kind of like, oh, our kids just got out of school. And I don't know, summers are only a couple months now. I remember when I went to school, it was half of May, June, July, half of August, so 3 months. And now our kids only have 2 months, but I'm just enjoying summer in our new location and with my kids, and we're doing fun stuff and I just love it. So we're just having a ball, and I hope you are too. If you have been to any great vacations, I'd love to hear about them. If you haven't already joined our Facebook group, make sure you check the show notes and there's a link in it. Or you could just go to www.facebook.com/groups/easyholisticliving. Just kind of all in one word jumbled. But this is a place where I'm just loving, and our audience is growing every day. And I just think it's really awesome to have that safe place to ask questions and get answers. And my whole goal was to have a non-judgy vibe, because we all start somewhere and we all come from somewhere. So you can also ask questions on any podcast that you hear. You can ask more about the podcast episode in the group too. So I just think it's a really great place, and I've been in a lot of mom groups, and this one's holistic living for families. So I have dads in there. I have, majority is moms, but it's a really hard and Facebook group environment to find a good group. I only have a couple that I really love, one being mine, but I just think it's so important to have like-minded people, because sometimes it's really easy just to feel alone in the holistic, natural realm, right? I mean, the majority mainstream people might look at us and be like, what? That doesn't work, or that's crazy, oh, that's an herb, it doesn't do that. So it's really nice to have you guys in there with me. And I know there's so many podcast listeners that are listening and they have not joined yet. So go join. I really want to meet you and see you in there. Okay? So today's episode, let's go ahead and chat with Robin. You guys might want to get a pen and paper out. She's going to be going over awesome stuff. Hi, Robin. Thank you so much for coming on the Thyroid Nutrition Podcast. How are you?
Hi, Alana. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, I know that I've talked a little bit about thyroid before on the podcast, but I know you are like one of the thyroid experts I love and I look up to. I've been following you for quite some time. So,
Aw.
why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. My name is Robin Arutt. I am an herbalist and a holistic nutrition health coach. And I also work as a health coach mentor and trainer to other coaches. So I work with primarily non medical practitioners to help them better help their clients in the issues surrounding thyroid and adrenal health. And I do that through a training program I developed and ongoing support and mentorship. Yeah, and that's in addition to my own practice with my own clients.
That's awesome. I think it's great that you are teaching about thyroid. And I remember actually sitting in on a webinar that you did, and I loved the way you were going with it. I know we're going to get into a little bit with the questions, but I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I just wish everyone could hear this information. So,
Well, it's funny because it's really does have broad application. My health coaching company, Full Potential Living, we work with people who already know they have a thyroid issue, but also people who are just having some chronic complaints, or they just aren't feeling right, or not feeling the same or as well as they used to, and not getting answers. And because we all have a thyroid and we all have endocrine disruptors and other things in our environment, it's something that we all really do need to know about.
definitely. So, yeah, you're on a mission to educate people about thyroid health. What brought you to this? And, why is it so important for everyone to know, and not just the people with thyroid issues? So, like our listeners, you may not have a diagnosed, thyroid issue, but I definitely encourage you to stay and listen because this is so important.
Yeah, it really is. Something that I try to bring up to people is that, we talk a lot in health about taking care of your heart, right? Heart disease and heart health. Or now, thankfully, especially in the holistic sphere, we talk more about taking care of your gut and your microbiome and your digestion or inflammation. These are things that are just part of our health. They're part of our system and they're core to our well-being and even to our being alive, right? And it's really the same with our thyroid. Our thyroid is something that is such a critical piece of our physiology. There is a thyroid hormone. There are thyroid hormone receptors on every cell of the body, and thyroid hormones actually play a role in just about every system that's happening in our daily lives as our bodies do all of the millions of miracles that they do every day to keep us going. And so since every one of us has a thyroid, and even those, who have had a thyroidectomy, they may be taking thyroid hormones, orally, but they are still dependent on thyroid hormones. And so we need to know how to take care of this, how to recognize the signs when something might be out of balance, and what to do about it so that we can just maintain our health and feel well. One of the reasons I'm really on a mission about it is because it's such a frequently misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed thing. And even when it is diagnosed, it's very frequently inadequately treated. So people may be put on medication. It's usually a Synthroid or a generic of Synthroid called levothyroxine. That's not the only med out there, by the way, but it's the most commonly prescribed. And for many people, that's not the right drug. So they may not be feeling well even with that, and they're not necessarily getting the attention and care that they deserve or the listening. So if, for example, they're still really tired, or they can't lose the weight, or they're still losing hair, etc., they may be told, well, of course you're tired. You've kids, or you're working, or you're probably under stress. And especially as women, we're told these things a lot and not really given proper due for the symptoms that we're having.
Yes. I actually hear that all the time.
Yeah.
What are some symptoms that people would have if they do have an imbalance of, your thyroid or even the adrenals?
Yeah, well, we'll start with thyroid. They actually do overlap a lot, and these two things exist together a lot. But if we look at thyroid, issues, it's far more common to have a form of hypothyroidism as opposed to hyperthyroidism. Hypo means not enough or too little thyroid hormone reaching the cells, and hyper would mean too much. And hypo is far, far more common. That doesn't mean hyper does not exist. It's still there. It's still important. But some of the symptoms are as follows. People may feel unusually tired, and that's just it's not normal tired. Like, oh, I did a lot today, and now it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and I'm getting tired. I need to go to bed. This is fatigue that's kind of unexplainable. So even if you get sleep, you're tired. Even if you really want to go work out, you're not going because you're comfortable on the couch. You're actually not going because you are too tired to get up and go do it. Brain fog is a big one. So brain fog can show up in a lot of ways. Difficulty focusing or concentrating, difficulty remembering things, executive function, starting projects, making decisions, just that sharpness and clarity. Certainly weight gain is a popular one. And thyroid issues aren't always necessarily responsible for, it's really hard to know because it depends on what else is going on physiologically. But a lot of people feel that if everything else is kind of okay and your thyroid is just a little off, you might be carrying an extra, 8 to 20 pounds. But if you're living with that for years and years, and you have kind of more fatigue, more inflammation, more discomfort because of the creeping weight, that, of course, can continue to creep up. Body temperature being low is another one, and we can talk about that a little later with more specifics, but a lot of people run a little low, and they're like, oh, it's only a degree or so, it's not a big deal, but that's actually a sign. Interestingly, the loss of eyebrow hair on the outer third of the eyebrow is a possible sign. Yeah, and hair loss is another sign, although hair loss could also be iron deficiency, but it is very common due to T3, which is the active hormone, T3 deficiency, or T3 not making it to the cells, which is another step in the chain of what's going on with us hormonally. Yeah, so those are a handful of symptoms. There are many. I mean, some people feel there are 70 to 80 symptoms that can actually be resolved when we optimize thyroid function.
Would you recommend the thyroid being even if, like you said, there's so many symptoms, would that kind of be your first route to recommend to go get checked out?
Well, when I make recommendations of labs for my clients, I start off with a pretty thorough questionnaire, and we spend time together talking, and I really listen for the whole picture, because our bodies are so amazing and they respond. So we're just divinely wired to get us through the day, And so if one thing is out of balance, you spoke about adrenals before, if, say, for example, we're low on progesterone or we're low on thyroid hormone, our adrenals are going to step in and ratchet things up to give us the energy we need to get through the day. So we may still feel okay for a while, but things are sort of out of balance, right? So we want to look at the whole system, and of course at the person and their lives and other things that may be contributing. But I do, since you mentioned it, I do think, in my dream world, everybody would have a full thyroid panel every year as part of an annual checkup. And that doesn't mean just a TSH test. That means a full panel every year to measure and monitor changes, and just for patients to know what their numbers are and really be able to take, some control and ownership about what's happening in their bodies over time.
See, that's how I am. I just love knowing what's going on in my body. Even if it's the simplest thing or a symptom that could happen, I'm but why is this happening? I'm always digging for the root cause and just wanting to be in the know. So I love that you recommend it yearly just to be in the know for your body. And I know that you mentioned, the common test that most doctors give is like the TSH. So if someone, is listening to the symptoms and like, wow, I have a lot of those symptoms, and, maybe they suspect they have a thyroid problem, where should they go? And what tests do you recommend that they really need to dig deep? And I know you're like TSH and T3. Can you kind of explain that to us, like which one is what and what they do?
Yeah, I would be happy to. I want to go back and just jump off of one thing that you mentioned earlier that I think is so, so important, and then I'll be happy to give you the whole scoop on the labs.
Yeah.
But yeah, knowing root cause is so important, and that sometimes comes after getting our labs back. And the thing is, I'm a holistic practitioner, so I love labs, I love numbers, I love science, I love physiology, but we are not only our numbers. We are the living, breathing beings with, jobs and relationships and, beautiful things in our lives and stressful things in our lives and trauma and all kinds of things. And we need to really see ourselves as whole people. Sometimes the labs, almost ironically, the labs can actually validate for us that something requires attention, because especially women, but I think men too, but especially women, when we just start feeling run down or feeling tired or the sex drive drops or the weight creeps on, usually we think it's just us, or it's just life, or it's just the stress of the month, or, whatever is happening in our lives. And we look at everything else. And in fact, we may have developed maybe first, and that caused some of the issues in our lives, or maybe the issues in our lives caused the imbalance, but there may in fact be an imbalance. So knowing our numbers gives us a window to then go deeper and say, okay, what is the root cause? There actually is something out of balance here. It's not just me or hormones or, PMS or something like that. Right. And so, I have a client who says, well, my kid just went off to college. It's probably that. And that was hard for her. But, and that might have been a piece. And that actually was something that we worked on in coaching, was addressing, the whole of that experience, right? But we also can address the physiology and what's happening so that she can start feeling better, so she can then work on the issue that was emotionally challenging, so they work together and in both directions.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, okay, labs, to get back to your question. So this is just a little mini lesson. And that webinar that I did, and I'll be doing others. If anybody wants to be kept informed of any upcoming ones, they can go to my website, which is FPL Health, F as in full, P as in potential, L as in living, fplhealth.com. But I teach this on the webinar because I think it's really important for people to know. Most of the time, up until just a few years ago, the only test that people got to screen, it was truly just a screener for thyroid, was called the TSH test. And the TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And that's actually a number that reflects the level of a hormone that is not manufactured by your thyroid, but by your pituitary. It's your brain telling your thyroid to get to work. So the theory was, if that number was elevated, your brain was, sort of turning up the volume on, knocking on the door of the thyroid going, hey, get to work, get to work.
Right.
So if that number was high, it meant you probably had low thyroid hormones. Okay, so elevated TSH, they thought meant low thyroid hormones. If that number was fine, they didn't do anything. If that number wasn't fine, they would maybe order a couple other tests.
Okay.
But we know now is that is just grossly insufficient, and TSH could be normal, and your thyroid levels can still be high or low. And so this science has been around. We're talking, Harvard and Yale doctors doing data research. This isn't just holistic stuff, quote unquote holistic stuff.
Yeah.
This science has been around for nearly 20 years. And only now are some doctors starting to change what they do, but not enough and far too slowly. So what we really want to be asking for is a full thyroid panel. And a full thyroid panel measures the TSH, the free T4, which is your inactive thyroid hormone. That's what your thyroid your thyroid makes more than that, but it's primarily what comes from your thyroid. There are other things too, but it's inactive. And then our bodies actually convert that inactive hormone into the active form. Our bodies, meaning mostly our gut function and our liver function, are responsible for converting that into active. And the active form is called T3. So we also want a free T3 test. That's the one that has to make it to the cells and put the key in the lock, so to speak, right? Put the thyroid hormone in that hormone receptor,
right,
and help us feel good. So what do we have so far? TSH, free T4, free T3. There are two kinds of antibodies that can often be present when people have hypothyroidism. One is called TPO and one is called TGAB. I think especially nowadays that so many people have low-grade and hidden autoimmune issues, I think that's an important baseline to get so you can watch your numbers over time. And the last one that makes up a full panel is called reverse T3. And that is one that many a doctor will still say is a useless number and they don't need to test it. If anybody listening can get most of these tests and not all, don't fret. Get the ones you can. But reverse T3 is actually known now to be a really important number. It's a natural block in your body to prevent your active thyroid hormone from getting to where it needs to go. So that's fine if the number is low, but if your reverse T3 is too high, which it can be if you have inflammation and other issues, even if you have enough T3, it will block it from getting into the cell. So you can see how looking at these numbers, it's like, wait, this number might look okay, it doesn't mean that number's okay, right? We really want to get a whole panel and look at that full panel at least annually.
Yeah, right. That's so interesting. Most people, like you ask them about thyroid, they're like TSH, and I'm like, no, there's just so many more.
Yes. Well, and more than that, which is, to add another piece to this, which is why I, help people understand what their labs mean, is that not only are the labs that are ordered often insufficient, I do want to say, because I don't want to leave those that may have hyperthyroidism out, there's one other antibody that usually is not ordered unless, you're showing symptoms of hyperthyroidism, but that's called TSI. I just want people to know that that's there. But anyway, the labs are one thing. The second really important thing that I help people understand is the ranges. So even if something comes back, quote unquote, normal, in the normal range, it does not mean that that number is optimal.
Yes.
Right? So that number is still clinically significant. TSH, we know scientifically that most people feel best at a 2.0 or below, from like a 1.7 to a 2.0. And anything above a 2.0, actually the person can be showing signs of hypothyroidism that actually resolve with treatment. But they're told they're normal if that number's all the way up to a 4, 4.5, sometimes even a 5.0.
Yes. I remember in my postgraduate studies, one of my books that I got was pretty much just all about labs and how it showed like the, normal range that most doctors go by, and then like the optimal range. And it's so crazy like how much is in between that, like you said, like testosterone, for example, could be fine, but you could be literally like borderline, quote unquote, deficient. And it's just crazy to me that it's not more focused on optimal levels versus a very broad range.
A really easy one to illustrate that point that you're making is vitamin D, right? So vitamin D is a pretty, simple one. Most people are talking about that now. We all know that we need it. We know deficiency is, a very widespread issue that is responsible for a number of health problems. And the range for vitamin D, almost universally, at least in the US, is considered normal if it's between 30 and 100. Okay, so that means if you're 30, you're the nurse practitioner or whatever will call from your doctor's office and say it's normal. If you're a 90, they'll say it's normal. So if you're a 30, it's normal, but if you're a 29, you're deficient. Like that, it doesn't make sense. We really need to know, as caretakers of our own bodies And as being responsible for our own health, both preventively and otherwise, we need to know optimal, and we need to know what that is and where that number is, is in relation to the optimal levels. For vitamin D, you really want that number at or above a 60. 60 to 90 is ideal. 30 is still, in my opinion, deficient, even though scientifically that's not called deficient. So we need to know this for all of our thyroid levels. T3, our active form, really should be in the upper third of the range. Some people even say the upper quarter. So there's a functional or optimal level and a normal level, normal range for all of these, but we don't always want normal, especially when normal is taken from, just the masses of people across the country. So the masses of people across the country, especially our country right now, are not the healthiest. We don't really want to be normal compared to them,
Yes, I remember hearing that for the first time. I was like, that is so right. Most of the people, like obesity, like that's becoming, or being maybe not obese, but overweight and having like fat on you. That's kind of like, if you look around, it's very normal. It's the average person. So I totally understand that. Is that why you think a lot of thyroid problems are just overlooked and misdiagnosed because they're just doing the wrong labs?
Yes, they're doing inadequate labs, and to their credit, and I don't mean to bash doctors. I don't know, anyone who wants to read my story, they can go to the website. But I was actually really, really sick for about 5 years, and I owe my life to good doctors, but also good doctors who would work with me as a partner. I was also doing a lot of my own research and activism for myself before it was easy to do that on the internet, right? So still not easy, but it's easier. And so, that's really what got me well. And there are so many great doctors out there, and there are more and more who are becoming aware of this, and even more who are well-intentioned but may not have the info, So they're doing what they were taught in school. They're doing what they believe to be right. But what they believe to be right in many cases is grossly outdated, and there's solid scientific data to prove that. Also, sadly, a lot of this is heavily influenced by pharmaceutical companies. Thyroid is one of the most commonly prescribed drugs in the United States. It's only effective for 30% of the people. It's only the right drug for 30% of those with hypothyroidism, but it's prescribed over 90% of the time. There are other options. Doctors need to know about those, and until they know about those, we need to know about those so that we can become our own, advocates and really speak up for what we need. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do, and I educate the public beyond just my clients so that they can advocate for themselves and really feel solid and educated in what they're asking about, what they're asking for, and the conversations that they're having with their doctors.
Oh, for sure. What are some things specifically that people can do in everyday lives? Nothing, like a regimen or anything, but just things people can do every day to help good thyroid health.
That's a great question. So it's a variety of things. Some are going to sound a little out there, but that's just how I work. So part of it is really just getting to know your body. Get to know your body, how you feel, what is normal. And if you start drifting away from what you know to be good for you, from what you know to be how you feel on a good day, when those days are not the vast majority anymore, say something, do something, go see a practitioner, and start digging, start getting help and asking questions. Number one. So really tune in. And that might be in a journal, rate your energy from a 1 to 5 every day, rate your pain. If you're somebody who might have chronic pain or joint issues or anything like that, any signs of inflammation, just note it. Rate your mood swings, depression, anxiety, all of those things can be brought on by too little thyroid hormone. Now, I'm not saying too little thyroid hormone is the reason for everything, but we need to know, we need to at least rule that out. Certainly before, going on a psychotropic med, unless of course it's an emergency, then do it. So, get to know yourself and monitor, write it down, write it in an app, write it in a journal. How are you feeling? And if you're not feeling great, acknowledge that it's okay and something might be going on. Don't just discredit your experience by blaming, everything around you, or not necessarily blaming, but, trying to justify it by looking at everything going on around you. We are all dealing with a lot. We're in a complex time, and I think that it's easy for us to say, oh, it's because of this going on with my kids, or that going on with my partner, or this going on with finances. That's why I'm not feeling right. But, it may not only be that. And it's okay. And it might just be something that actually can be addressed within you. The other thing is, when you go to the doctor and get labs done, ask for a full panel. And if they say, well, you don't really need one, just say, I would like one as a baseline. Right? This is a really important language to learn. And very often they will say okay, or if you have any kind of history of thyroid stuff, that can often be used as a reason to get a full panel. And always ask for a copy of the lab results. Don't rely on the phone call from the doctor's office saying everything's normal, you're good. Ask for a copy, and ask for a copy of your prior ones, so that you can look at changes over time. And some dietary stuff. Eat your minerals, right? We've all hear about green leaves, but eat those green leaves. There are some myths out there about, raw kale and raw Brussels sprouts and what we call goitrogens. It's true that, if you have a ton of those raw every day, that could actually interfere with your thyroid function, but you would have to have a lot, and you'd have to have them raw. So if you're cooking those, it's fine. They are so good for you, but get your minerals through greens, through sea vegetables, but definitely eat your minerals. Minerals are food for thyroid function. We really do need those.
Awesome.
The last one that might sound a little way out is for anyone who is into chakras, the thyroid is in the throat chakra, right? And that is your voice. It's your personal expression. And I invite everyone who's listening to actually just take a moment and ask themselves if they are feeling fully expressed. Is there something they've always loved to do that they haven't done in years? Is there something they long to do or say or be or create or try that they haven't? And to really honor who you are and your desires, because repressing those critical elements of who you are will, suppress your hormone function. And I can't scientifically prove that yet, but there are some studies going on that actually point in this direction. And I'm sure that within a few years, we will be able to say that this is undeniably true. And I can say it just from the many clients I've worked with. And when we start to reinstate some of these elements of personal expression, things start to change physiologically.
I love that. And that's not out there. I feel like that should be known. Usually those stuff that's quote unquote out there are usually the best ones.
Right? It's true, because it's the stuff that most of us haven't tried yet,
Yeah.
But it's true, yeah.
There's so much information that you gave. Can you let us know where people can find you in case they want more information? What social media? Where's your website at? I know you kind of mentioned it throughout the podcast, but you can share again.
Sure. Yeah, people are. I'm accessible, so there is actually a contact form on my website. But you can go to fplhealth.com. So the company, my health coaching company, is called Full Potential Living. So it's fplhealth.com, and you can click around on there. I actually have an item on there that you can opt into and receive for free that will be helpful. And there's a contact form. So if somebody has questions for me or wants to speak with me further, you can get in touch with me through that. And I'm also on Facebook at Full Potential Living. And Twitter, although I don't tweet nearly enough, or at least it's not as much as they tell me I'm supposed to.
I don't either.
But you can find me on Twitter at FPL Health also. So, yeah, those are the ways you can find me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye, everybody in the podcast.
The contents of this podcast are for educational purposes only. This information is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional, and it is not intended for medical advice. This is the sharing of knowledge and information from education, research, and experience. I am not a registered dietitian or physician. I encourage you to make your own healthcare decisions based on your research and partnership with a healthcare professional. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.